I'm Cheryl Spencer, and I'm going to start off the slideshow, and then Eileen will talk about some things, and Odile will talk about some things. So between us, we hope you will come away with a better understanding of nuclear weapons and why we want them to be abolished. So this is a photograph that you will probably find quite familiar. An aerial photograph of Hiroshima a few days after the bombing by a nuclear weapon that happened on the 6th of August, 1945. This was taken by the US Army Air Force, and it shows a church that was 1.2 kilometers from what they call the hypocenter, where the bomb was exploded in the air above Hiroshima. So these were absolutely awful circumstances, and the destruction was just horrific. But what we need to understand is that the weapons we have now that have been created and designed since then are much stronger than the weapons that were used over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And if we were to have a nuclear war, it wouldn't be just one or two bombs that would be exchanged between enemies. There'd be a lot more bombs, and they'd be much larger. And so the point of our presentation here is to show you why they're much stronger and the effects of actually having a bomb, but also there are other parts of the nuclear weapons enterprise that are harmful to people. And so we're going to show you, from the uranium mining, okay, that is a harmful activity. And we have somebody here from the Congo, and I'm sure she is very familiar with that aspect of nuclear weapons. So next, I'm going to explain why is a nuclear bomb so much more destructive than a chemical bomb. The TNT, which you've all heard of, is what we call a chemical bomb. So here I'm going to very quickly and easily, I hope, show you how a nuclear bomb works, okay? You've heard, I'm sure, of the expression a chain reaction. So if you look at the diagram on the left, you will see on the far left one single uranium atom. And assume that you've made your bomb so some neutrons come in, a free neutron, and it goes into the uranium, and that actually splits the uranium into two different elements, barium and krypton. But at the same time, and it's shown by this yellow star-like thing, there's a lot of energy released, okay? And three more neutrons are released, and those three neutrons go on and hit three more atoms. And then they have neutrons come out, and they go on and hit, in this case, I show you six more atoms. You end up with six atoms of other things, and this is just the beginning. And so as time goes on, and it all happens in milliseconds, you end up with a great deal of energy being exuded from this packet of material that you've put together. And we call this a self-sustaining chain reaction. And your bomb heats up, and it can't stay contained anymore. It explodes, blows itself apart, and the energy, which is represented by all these little yellow things, your yellow energy here, it actually creates a shock wave, okay, which is a wave that comes out from where the bomb exploded and will flatten infrastructure, will flatten buildings, it will flatten even large buildings. And along with that shock wave, it is very hot. It's an intense flash of heat comes out at the same time, and that heat vaporizes materials. And unfortunately, it also vaporizes people. This is why a nuclear weapon is so much more destructive than a TNT, weapon, okay? So now I'm going to tell you about how many weapons we now have in the world and how they are delivered, okay? So those bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were delivered by dropping them from aeroplanes. And in the meantime, in the 80 years since then, more ways of delivering these weapons has been developed. And those are, I list there the three major reasons. One is called intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBM, and the same kind of missile, which is like a rocket that can fly through the atmosphere and land at its target. They can also be kept in submarines and launched from a submarine. They're called SLBMs, and then they can still be dropped from aeroplanes, very large aeroplanes, bombing aeroplanes, and they also from an aeroplane you can launch a missile. So we hear from the experts, like former US generals, that actually ICBMs are not necessary. They're an unnecessary part of the triad because they are sitting ducks. Everybody in the world who worries about these things knows exactly where the US's ICBMs are sitting. They're sitting in silos, underground silos, in Wyoming and North Dakota and Colorado. There are 4 states that have 400 silos, and they're in the middle of our country. And if we were to be attacked, those are the places where, for example, Russia would target their ICBMs. So we say that they make us more vulnerable, not less, because our enemies would say, "Oh, well, we know where to hit the US. We know how to deliver a nasty blow to them." So now we have 9 countries who have nuclear weapons. In the interim, 9 countries, and in a later slide, you'll see who those 9 countries are. And amongst all those countries, the people who keep track of this say there are 13,000 nuclear weapons ready to be used. When we say ready to be used, another word is deployed. Okay, so this is why we are worried, and I hope by the end of this presentation, you will also be worried about 13,000 nuclear weapons. Okay, so I'm now going to turn this over to Eileen, my colleague Eileen, and she is going to talk about the human health effects from bombs and other nuclear activity. So Eileen, go ahead, please.
Yes. Well, hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and I will jump right in. The human health effects from nuclear bombs, the radiation emitted by them, and fallout. Well, needless to say, the health effects from nuclear bombs and radiation are very profound and very upsetting. The info we are sharing and the stories by Hibakusha, the survivors, are useful to educate others to help, and which we really need, to eliminate nukes. For stories, I recommend, but there's so many other very fine writers. Charles Pellegrino's book, Ghosts of Hiroshima. Now on to the actual slide. The aerial bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki killed between 150 and 246,000 people by the end of 1945, so over 4 months. Most were civilians. They died from intense heat, severe burns, crush injuries from flying rubble and collapsing buildings, radiation poisoning, infections, collapsed lungs, and unavailable emergency medical help because hospitals were destroyed and the medical providers were dead or sick. Those who survived required years of medical help, including those who suffered deafness from perforated eardrums and blindness from retinal burns. In my research, I found 2 long studies the Japanese and Americans did about the Hibakusha. For extensive details, I refer you to the Lifespan Study, LSS. I'll bring that up later, and the Radiation Effects Research Foundation, RERF. While I have to explain this further, though. While I was attending the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review in the UN a few months ago, I met a few Hibakusha descendants who were physically suffering, and I was told of their severe birth defects. And between their illnesses, they were sure that this demon got passed through them from their parents and grandparents. But the scientists who were at this review reported on radiation effects from the Radiation Effects Research Foundations indicated there was no strong evidence that effects passed on to generations in their research. Well, so for the purpose of this presentation, I chose a peer-reviewed research that focused on radiation effects and founded in Ukraine. And that's why what I'm sharing is based on 15 years of monitoring done following the Ukraine Chernobyl nuclear power plant catastrophe of April 1986. And those who survive face many, many health issues from radiation. And you have to just relate this back to the Japanese. And not only the Japanese, but the slaves who were, that's a loose term, but a lot of South Koreans were also in the bombing, and they were forced to clean up. I met some of them at the review. They had many types of problems too, and many of them were in these categories: the nervous system, muscular weakness, numbness, and heart problems. Remember, the heart is a muscle, and it's innervated by the nervous system. The endocrine system, particularly the thyroid, but there was also a lot of diabetes and digestive issues. I was surprised at how many endocrine hormones affected the digestion in our bodies. There was blood circulation problems, well known to you, the leukemia, lymphoma, and of course, many were immunity compromised. Urogenital system problems, particularly the kidneys, sexual dysfunction, and difficulties reproducing, and all had psychological problems that varied. Most were depression. So in summary, they gathered for this. Overall, from 1988 to 1999, the ratio of healthy people around Chernobyl and downwind from it decreased from healthy 67.7% to 29%. However, many were lucky. They received good medical and psychological care. Another peer-reviewed research came under UNIDIR, the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research. This is an autonomous institution within the United Nations that conducts independent research on disarmament and international security issues.
Yeah.
And these folks, Nichols and Olson, focused on gender and ionizing radiation, the differences observed between females and males, as reviewed with the UNIDIR 2024. Overall, they did a lot more research on this, a lot of listings, pages actually. Some included some radiation research done after 2006 provides clear evidence that radiation causes more cancer, heart disease, and stroke in women compared to men. And women suffer more than men, as is often the case in war. The second part that was quite interesting and was sitting there all along was that children between 0 and 5 years are more susceptible to ionizing radiation, and girls 0 to 5 years suffered 2 times more cancer over the next 60 years than boys exposed at the same age. Now, you can't see the fine print underneath this graph, so I'm going to share with you what Nichols and Olson indicated there. Their research was based on the data presented in the LLS, that lifespan study I mentioned above. Each individual was exposed to the same amount of radiation, which is important to standardize a study. The small print indicated that the exposure was 1 gray for everybody. A gray, or GY, is the unit of an absorbed dose of ionizing radiation. And 1 gray is equivalent to 1,000 chest x-rays. It's a lot. Now let's look at this chart. You can see the orange is for females, blue for boys, and by the time of 1 year old, or you know, the 0 area, it was twice. But you keep on following the graph, and you see even up into the 80-year-old range, the women still have more effects than the males. They ended their study like most researchers actually do. Nichols and Olson said that more research needs to be done on these findings. Okay, next slide. Okay, what are treaties? And how do they get produced and implemented? Okay, an international treaty is a binding formal agreement, a contract of other written instruments or instrument that establishes obligations between two or more subjects of international law, primarily made between states or sovereign nations. The key distinguishing feature of a treaty is that it is binding. The country's signature via a senior official shows its intention to be bound by the treaty. In order for a treaty to become binding upon the United States, for example, the U.S. Senate must provide its advice and consent to treaty ratification by a 2/3 majority. And it so happens that since 1963, the politicians in nuclear weapons countries have negotiated arms control treaties, either regarding having testing of, explosive testing of nukes, or to reduce their numbers. Next. Arms control treaties. First, all right. These are the ones negotiated since 1970. When they ended, well, we were left to have to get something else, and that resulted in the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW. Why was a new treaty needed? Because the existing treaties weren't working, obvious. The 1970 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, that I referred to recently, had 190 nations signing. We have 195 nations, and they were not working. After 2001, states were no longer reducing their stockpiles of nuclear weapons per the required obliging of Article 6. Then we had this Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty signed in 1991, which led to the good thing, the USSR and Russia, well, us and USSR ridding 80% of our nuclear weapons, which they did by 2001. But then the USSR became Russia, and with a new start. Okay, just to keep in mind that this new start was to restrict nations to 1550 deployed strategic warheads. And on October 21, February 2023, Russia suspended its participation in New START. However, it did not withdraw from the treaty and clarified that it would continue to abide by the numerical limits of the treaty. Both the U.S. and Russia allowed the treaty to expire, however, on February 5 this year. Okay, and now we're into the organization that created the TPNW. In 2007, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICAN, was started through the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. They modeled the TPNW on the quite successful for many years international campaign to ban landmines and its focus on humanitarian aspects of weapons, which we've continued to do. Backstory: a Malaysian obstetrician named Ron McCoy proposed the ICAN approach. Of interest to WILPF is ICAN's first staff member was an Australian named Felicity Hill Ruby. She was a close colleague of many of the physicians in ICAN, and she was well known internationally for her outstanding years of work on nuclear disarmament, particularly through her role as director of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom at the UN office in New York for Reaching Critical Will Project. And in 2005, Ray Atchison became the director of Reaching Critical Will and wrote about ICAN TPN W campaign in her book, which I read, Banning the Bomb, Smashing the Patriarchy. Let's go on. What does the TPNW prohibit and its current status? Okay, the goal of this legally binding treaty is the total elimination of nuclear weapons. The treaty has 20 articles, and the first article is the most important. The treaty did go into enforce for the ratifying states in January 21, 2021. What are those prohibitions? All ratifying states parties are prohibited from developing, testing, producing, manufacturing, transferring, possessing, stockpiling, using, or threatening to use nuclear weapons, or allowing nuclear weapons to be stationed in their territory. It also prohibits from assisting, encouraging, or inducing anyone, not just countries, to engage in any of these activities, a tall order. Yet, wonderfully, as of July 2026, 75 states have ratified the TPN, and an additional 25 signatories are added to that, which brings the number up to 100. A majority of the world's 195 countries. And the latest of the signers was this month. Tonga acceded on the 7th of July. Slide 10. Why the TPNW is our best strategy for achieving a nuclear weapon-free world. Now you have to consider peace treaties have not been held through the centuries. Some for a short time, some for hardly any, but some did last. But here's our reasons for going with it. History shows that the prohibition of certain types of weapons, facilitates progress towards their elimination. Weapons that have been prohibited by the treaties are increasingly seen as illegitimate, losing their political status and, along with it, the resources for their production. As more countries ratify the TPNW, nuclear weapons will lose political status. Arms companies will carry more reputational risks, and investors will shun them. We will describe how to divest from arms companies later in the session. Odile will help us with that. We must pressure, we really do, our politicians at all levels to endorse the TPNW and get more countries, regions, and cities to become nuclear weapon-free zones. The continents of Latin America and Africa and the regions of the South Pacific, Southeast Asia, Central Asia are already nuclear weapons-free zones, each established by a multilateral treaty, which I have to describe. It is one in which two or more sovereign states are parties. Each party owes the same obligations to all other parties, except to the extent that they have stated reservations. Now we move on to hear again from my colleague Cheryl, who will talk of global military expenditure.
Okay, so we're now going to run through quite quickly why nuclear weapons are bad for everybody. And it's not just when they're exploded, as we will show. They are bad for various other reasons. So here is a nice graph that shows you from 1990 to 2025 how much money is being spent globally on military things. This is not just nuclear weapons. There's all kinds of military equipment and paying people and what have you. And the different colors on the graph show you the different regions. So that the bottom, the very dark blue, are the Americas, the America region. Above it is Europe. Then as you get smaller, Asia and Oceania obviously spend less. And then the Middle East and Africa, Africa's the kind of dark orange at the very top of each of the columns there. But what you can see is from 2010 onwards, more and more money is being spent all over the world on military things. And of course, this money comes from citizens' tax payments. Okay, so WILPF has said this money should be spent on civilian needs, such as healthcare and better pay for teachers. We don't need this money to be spent on anything military. Okay, but now I'm going to show you in particular how much money is spent on nuclear weapons. Okay, I mentioned 9 countries that have nuclear weapons now, and there they are listed alphabetically in the right-hand side. And this shows you how much money each country has spent on nuclear weapons over the past 5 years. And you'll see billions and billions and billions of dollars, totaling $471 billion. And there are institutes that luckily keep track of all this. One is called, a very useful one, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, which we call SIPRI. And we have references that those of you who want to go and look up some of this yourselves will be able to find through our references more details. So if you look at just 2025 and compare it to the year before, you'll find that actually the spending went up by 19% on nuclear arsenals. All right. And so in 2025, a total of $119 billion was spent by these 9 countries. And if you calculate that per second, $3,768 US dollars were spent per second in the world on nuclear weapons, and a total of 471 billion. So we are saying we don't want that money spent on nuclear weapons. We want it spent on things that civilians need. So this is an interesting table here. Again, calculated, this one comes from ICANN itself. So we have 9 countries, and if you look per minute, the US is spending $226,069 per minute on nuclear weapons. Okay. And if we would take that money and instead provide a year of clean water and better sanitation for citizens, how many people would be helped by spending that money instead on them? So the US, over 2,000 people could be helped for a year for the amount of money spent on nuclear weapons. The UK, 369 people could be helped. Israel, we know Israel has nuclear weapons. They won't admit to it, but we know they have them. And there, in Israel, 36 people could be helped with clean water instead of spending it on nuclear weapons. So this is just one example of where this money would be much better to be spent. And now I just want to talk briefly about this thing called the Golden Dome. You've probably heard about it. The US federal administration is saying that they want a Golden Dome to be built. Now, I'm a physicist, and I have physics colleagues who have looked at what would be needed to make this whole system of, you'd have satellites in the air that were trying to find incoming ICBMs and shoot them out of the sky. And it's been likened to trying to hit a bullet with another bullet. That is virtually impossible to hit a bullet that's going pretty damn fast. These ICBMs are traveling at 15,000 miles per hour. Trying to hit one of those out of the sky is very difficult. And my physics colleagues have essentially shown that it would never work. Nevertheless, the US government wants to continue to try to design and make it. And the cost for that, $1.2 trillion over the next 20 years. Okay. So this is the kind of reasons we don't like nuclear weapons, the money spent on them. Okay. Another reason we don't like nuclear weapons. So, in order to make a nuclear weapon, as I showed you in the beginning, you need a bunch of uranium and or plutonium. And so where do we get the plutonium from? Because it is not found in the ground. Uranium is found in the ground. Well, you need a nuclear power reactor to turn the uranium into plutonium. And so the United States built specifically just to make plutonium for bombs, hundreds of these reactors between 1944 and 1988. And the process of trying to make this plutonium leaves behind gallons, hundreds of gallons of hazardous mixed liquid waste. And they are hazardous because they've got chemicals in them and they're radioactive. And as you heard from Eileen, radiation creates all kinds of problems, health problems for people. And if it's enough, it will kill you. So there is currently in the US, no viable way of disposing of this waste. And it sits in barrels and the barrels leak and they leak into the ground. And some of that waste then leaks into nearby rivers. And a good example of this is the place called Hanford in Washington State. That is where they made the nuclear weapons that bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki back in 1944. So unfortunately, the US is also going to be making more nuclear weapons. Now we don't have to abide by any treaties about reducing nuclear weapons. This thing called the plutonium pits, they're like a trigger for a nuclear weapon. And so they're going to be building a building in one of our eastern states and making more of these pits, which are very dangerous to the people who make them. And not necessarily we have in storage a whole bunch of plutonium pits. So these environmental effects also came from the testing of nuclear weapons. You've probably all heard about the Marshall Islands, where in the 1950s, the 1960s, the US exploded as testing bombs in the air and in the water, and they completely disappeared some islands because they blew them up. And then the ones they didn't blow up, they left so much radiation, radioactive fallout and waste that the people can't live there anymore. So these effects of the testing and the creation of the plutonium have an environmental impact which will be felt for generations. Now, another thing that could happen if we had a nuclear war is a thing called nuclear winter. I'm guessing you've probably heard about nuclear winter, so I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of how that would happen. And again, scientists who work on these kind of things have computer models, so they can put data into a computer and say, let's pretend there was a war between India and Pakistan. They are two of the countries that have nuclear weapons, and they are arch enemies. They don't hardly talk to each other. And you've probably heard that they fight on their borders with conventional weapons. Well, one day they may decide to set off their nuclear weapons. And so this computer model says, let's suppose 100 bombs went off between India and Pakistan. They would target the cities of the other country. And what happens, as I explained, you get a firestorm. You get a lot of heat, a lot of flames, a lot of things incinerated. and that all goes up into the atmosphere. Okay, that's what happens, this dense smoke layer. And it will go up to this area called the stratosphere. The stratosphere is, depending where you are on the Earth, between 15 and 50 kilometers above ground. Okay, and they showed by their modeling that it would remain in the stratosphere, this dense black smoke, for years. And what does that smoke do? Well, it stops sunlight from reaching the Earth's surface. And it's on the Earth's surface where we're trying to build to grow food, right? With wheat and rice and apples and oranges. And there wouldn't be enough sunlight for most of those crops to actually survive. And so what you would see is less food being available, and their modeling showed that up to 2 billion people would starve to death. Okay, that's just from a limited 100 weapons exchanged war. If we had a full-out war between, for example, the US and Russia, then you would actually, the temperature in the earth could drop by 15, the average temperature, 15 degrees, and that could trigger what we call an ice age. Okay, we've had ice ages in the distant past. This would be a new ice age, and it would last for thousands of years. So this is another reason we need to get rid of nuclear weapons. Lastly, I will talk about the beginning of the whole process to make a bomb. First of all, you've got to get the uranium out of the earth, and so we have the uranium actually exists in many different countries in the rocks, and in the same rocks, geological processes have also put arsenic and lead in the same rocks. There's some of the toxic, we call those toxic heavy metals. And so miners in open pits in the past have dug out those rocks, and then they have another process to extract the uranium from the rest of the rocks. Okay, and the miners in the past, especially in the Congo, at a mine called Shinkoloboe, okay, you'll see the name down there in the lower paragraph. They worked without protective clothing. And so the Manhattan Project that produced the bombs that bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki got the most of their uranium from this mine in the Congo. At that time, that part of Africa was it was a colony of Belgium. And so the miners suffer from respiratory illnesses, kidney failure, cancer, and then once you've extracted the uranium, you've got all this waste, which is called tailings, and they get piled up around this open pit, and it sits there for years, and it's radioactive, and it could take thousands of years to decay. You've heard of radioactive decay. And again, the remains are going into the soil, and then through the soil it might reach the groundwater, and you get groundwater contamination. So this mine is just one example of open pit mining. And when it was being used for by the Manhattan Project, this was an observation somebody had that, thousands of miners are working there, tens of thousands of miners with many pits, and they make craters in the landscape. And the town that was close by, Shinkoloboe, was disappearing. Okay, now officially they closed that mine. It took them till 2004 to close that mine, but the tailings are still there and are still presenting a problem for the citizens of the Congo who live near it. Now, uranium is mined in many different places still, okay? And I've just listed there at the bottom the major producers of uranium. We have mines in Utah, for example. Canada has uranium mines. Kazakhstan, Namibia in Africa, and Australia all have uranium mines. And they all suffer various degrees from these tailings and contamination worry. Okay, so now we are going to move on to this video that I told you we would be showing you. So the Arms Control Association is a well-known association here in the US who have been working on getting more treaties created and negotiated. And we worried, when the New START treaty ended, we tried to get the US government to agree to honor its limit on the deployed weapons, but they wouldn't. And this is one of the worries. And so every year they give an award out to an organization or people who have been working hard on nuclear abolition. And they decided in 2025 to award it to a group of high school students in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so now Ellen is going to run that for us.
こんにちは。私たちは日本で活動している高校生平和大使及び高校生1万人署名活動のメンバーです。この度はアームズコントロールパーソンオブザイヤーに私たち高校生平和大使を選んでいただいたこと、大変光栄に思っています。ありがとうございます。私たちはいろんな高校から集まり、毎月街頭や駅、学校、講演会などで核兵器の廃絶と平和な世界の実現を求める署名を一人一人集めています。ここ、広島では平和公園で活動しており、外国人観光客の方を含め、多くの方々に署名をいただいております。
私たちの活動の始まりは、1998年、インドとパキスタンが核実験を行ったことにより、世界中に核使用の危機が広まったことでした。緊迫した世界情勢に危機感が高まる一方、日本では戦争終世代の高齢化により、次世代の原爆の記憶や活動の継承が課題になっていました。原爆がもたらした深い苦しみが忘れ去られ、核軍拡に向かうとしている今だからこそ、二度と悲劇を繰り返さないために、私たち若者が声を上げなければならない。そんな強い思いから、長崎で高校生平和大使が誕生しました。
被爆者が生涯を捧げてきた運動を継続するために、私たちは継続することを胸に私たちは活動を続け、今では約19都道府県に拡大しています。これまで29年間で集めた署名は283万4213筆に上ります。私たちは毎年夏に全国の高校生平和大使約20人でジュネーブにある国連欧州本部を訪れ、署名の目録を提出しています。昨年は全国で11万1071筆の署名が集まりました。私も派遣に参加し、署名をしてくださった方々の核兵器廃絶の思いを軍縮の最前線で働く方々に直接届けました。国連軍縮部の所長から、若者の皆さんの勇気ある行動が私たちに希望とエネルギーを与えてくれますという言葉をいただき、私たちが活動してきた意義を感じました。私たち高校生にはまだまだ長い未来が存在します。その未来に向かって私たちが願う平和な世界のために行動を続けることは世界を動かす大きなうねりになると信じています。私は広島で育ち、平和記念資料館や被爆者の講話を通して核兵器の恐ろしさや平和の尊さについて考える機会に恵まれました。その中で今私が命の危険にさらされることなく文教や部活や好きなことに自由に取り組めているのは、これまでその日常を守れるよう声を上げてきてくださった方々がいるからだと気づきました。私もその活動を継承したいと思っていましたが、なかなか行動に踏み出せないでいるときに、この活動に参加している先輩に出会いました。自分にできることを見つけ、ひたむきに取り組む彼女に感銘を受け、私もこの活動に参加し始めました。私たち一人一人ができることは少なく、限られたコミュニティの中であるものかもしれません。けれど私は、周りの人がポジティブな風に変わっていく様子を実感してきました。その変化を地道に積み重ね、地域社会で平和の思いを広げていくこと、 それこそが核廃絶への第一歩なのではないかと感じています。これからも続く平和を紡ぐために、私たちはささやかで忍耐強く継続的な努力をしていきます。核の恐ろしさを知る広島や長崎からの平和を願う声は、核が使われる恐怖が高まっている今だからこそ、決して絶やしてはならないと強く感じています。
私は活動の中で署名してくださった方々の思いを無駄にしないために、
私は大切な人と心から全力で笑い合える未来のために、私は家族や友人を失う恐怖のない、誰もが安心して暮らせる未来のために、私は誰もが自分のやりたいことを自由に取り組める世界のために、私は日々の生活を当たり前だと感じ続けられるために、活動を続けていきます。なぜなら私たちは、
微力だけど無力じゃないから。
あ
ありがとうございました。
Isn't that amazing? These are young people, high schoolers in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, noting that the Hibakusha are dying. They are carrying on, and they've been doing it since 1998. Sorry about some of the captions were covered up, but I think you got the idea. Between them and their earlier high school students, because high school students have been doing this since 1998. They have collected over 2 million signatures from people visiting the cities. A lot of people visit Hiroshima and Nagasaki to pay tribute to the people who died. And so I can understand why the Arms Control Association gave them a prize, because they continue to do this and then they teach their colleagues. So now I'm going to go back to sharing the screen and showing the rest of our slideshow. And so share screen. And I'm going to, okay, so I'm now going to go back to where we were. And so now we are going to hear from Odile, one of our Disarm Committee members, and she is actually sitting in France right now, and she's going to talk to us about a strategy for trying to harm the nuclear weapons enterprise, and that is the concept of divesting. So Odile, please go ahead. Unmute yourself.
So what can we do, like those young people? What is in our power to do? So in the 60s, as you know, women used to take over military base, like in Greenham Commons, take over them and close them down. Or in US, some activists that were brave went on to nuclear weapons base and got arrested to make the plight their belief known that those weapons will end our humanity and we need to do anything we can do to stop them. But now we are looking at possibly how money-wise this war economy is surviving. And we find that it's in funds, in stock. And so we are looking more at what we can do in our own stock, our own pension, our retirement investment. Where are they placed? And where does the money go to? So we are looking also at our cities and our university, where they are invested and where they invest their funds, because it's a big war economy and we have to stop and divest from this war economy in order to create peace and a peace culture. So it's important for us to do our own research, but there are many tools on the website that you can find that will help you to look into where your investment or the investment of your cities or your pension fund or your universities are. And you will find out that many of those armed companies are listed, and we will pass to the next slide. Here, those are the companies that are mainly the biggest one. And so what you must look at in your pension fund, in your retirement account, in your own investment, or in your city's investment and your university's investment, is any of those benefiting any of those corporations that are building bonds. They take our tax money and they put it in their pocket in order to make this war system works. So we have to say no, and that means you have to get involved with them and see and said, stop, I don't want any more this money to be invested in that. We can invest it in school, in healthcare, in many other things, or like Ellen Thomas asked us to do design, start designing an economic conversion in terms of a country. Because some country can prepare an economic conversion. Economic conversion, that means that the country as a whole will stop investing those into military funds and doing it instead in funds that go to support people, schools, healthcare, the environment, all those things. So you can start in your city by looking in the fund where your city is invested, and you can start submitting a resolution. But basically, that means you have to get really involved and you really have to do the research. But I'm sure you can find students in your towns or researchers, scientific people that might help you to find those things, because it's not so easy. But we have to be persistent. We want peace, and we want a change from a war system to a creative and peaceful world. So that's what I will say. So don't bank on the bomb that was before. There is many, don't bank on the bomb, take action for divestment. They will suggest many of those. So many people are preparing package for you, an example that you can follow. So you have to go and research those things, and maybe you get, especially inspired by one. Recently in United States, the UAW union, the union with all its members, they voted to amend the constitution and divest from 400,000 Israeli bonds. And that is not exactly going to nuclear weapon, but it might, some of it might also, and it's going to many armament, because as I say, armament, they take our tax dollar and they transform it into this military economy, which prones power over other. And many countries like, other countries like Congo suffer from the mining or from the weapon. Many countries are being bombed, like Gaza. Many countries are, or Ukraine. So we can follow the war system and see where it's bombing everywhere. And we have to go to the investment that allow this and stop it. So especially ICANN has a lot about divestment, and they will tell you there is 30 financial institutions that have ceased investing in nuclear weapon company. So you can find article about that, but what is important, it's your own action and trying to find a team of people that feel the same way than you. Even if you are 5 or 6 people, you can do quite a lot. So what we want you to do is to go back to your country and try to do what you can, and let us know in the US Disarm Committee what you've been able to do, because together we are power, we are the strength that can change the world. So we can help each other and get to know and support each other in doing those things. You can still do demonstration and we can still do occupation of bases. But then we need to go to the economy. That's eventually what will change things. Reach out to your US diplomat at the UN or your UN diplomat and tell them and try to engage them, because you know that the nuclear weapon countries are the ones that are blocking the whole process from divestment. I want to say that also in the world there is growing nuclear weapon free zone, and nuclear weapon free zone give me a lot of hope because it's been growing over the world. And in the Middle East, what we would like to see, it's a weapon of mass destruction free zone. So there are people working on this. It's very slow, but being slow doesn't matter if we go towards what our hopes and dreams are for. We need to continue.
So here we have an examples of what we have been doing in WILPF US, and which I'm sure some of you in other countries are doing. And we can, in the discussion period, we will see what other things people in other countries are already doing. So one of the things that we're working hard on is reducing the amount of money given to the Pentagon. The Pentagon is our military department in the US. That is where those billions of dollars are going. The president has requested $1.5 trillion to start in October the 1st, when our fiscal year starts. And just yesterday, in the Senate, we managed to have enough senators refuse to do that without discussion, that they are now going to have to go through his budget requests piece by piece and hopefully remove some of the money that he has asked for. Also, we need to tell our diplomats that we need new multilateral arms control treaties. We want Russia, China, and the US, who amongst us, the three of us, we own the most nuclear weapons. We need more control treaties where we agree that we will try to get rid of them, and in the meantime we will only deploy so many, and there are other things you can put into treaties. One way you do that is you have inspectors go to the other country and check that they are not surreptitiously making more nuclear weapons. Okay, demonstrations in public places. I'm now going to go to the next and the last slide. Okay, so here's our last slide. Where should you do these demonstrations? Because you want the public to know what is happening. Because most of the public is not worried about nuclear weapons, but we are trying to have them add it to their very long list of worries. It's unfortunate we have so many different things to worry about. So you can find out, is there a company that's making the missiles that deliver these nuclear weapons in the vicinity of your town? Here in Palo Alto, we are in what we call Silicon Valley, and just down the road in Sunnyvale, Lockheed Martin has a big plant where they are designing and making the missiles. So once a month we go stand outside that plant with signs, and we show the signs to the employees going in to the plant and coming out for lunch. Please, you must realize how awful it is, the things that you are designing in there. Please stop doing it. You might find that there's a company who helps with the software of a lot of the military stuff. So it's not just the people who make the weapons that we need to get to, it's the people who write the computer programs that enable these missiles to be used. And Odile talked about converting factories. So yes, we want the factories to not be used for weapons anymore, but they can still be used for other civilian products. And you'll see there the website called Warheads to Windmills. They have a whole section on economic conversion and the fact that the people who are currently designing nuclear missiles have the skills to design other things like windmills. There's very large windmills that create electricity. So we wouldn't be putting people out of a job. You don't want to put people out of a job by converting away from nuclear weapons, but it can be done. And these, we will be making a package of materials that will include some of these links to these interesting and useful websites. And we haven't done that yet. And anybody who registered for this event, and I see we now have 20 people here, you will get a resource packet. And the last thing you can do is get your city government to join this organization called Mayors for Peace. And Mayors for Peace will help you with resolutions that gets your city to promise that it will have nothing to do with nuclear weapons. And you've heard of San Francisco. San Francisco and Berkeley have had these resolutions now for many years. And the Mayors for Peace is trying to get, it has over 8,000 cities that have agreed they will have nothing to do with nuclear weapons. So that is our last slide. I'm going to stop sharing now, and we're going to go to our discussion period. And so I'm going to stop the share. And there you all are. And so, and Eileen and I will moderate. And so if you have a question, something that wasn't clear, or a comment, now is we have 15 minutes more of our 90 minutes to have a general discussion. What can other things that you can do? And so I'm looking now for hands. Gloria, I see your hand up. Please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Something you said in the last part, Cheryl, about needing to have mayors proclaim their cities, join this Mayors for Peace, et cetera, et cetera. Well, not all cities are the same. San Francisco has a varied economy, and some cities are far more one industry or two industry towns. So I would propose, because I'm a regular at our Disarm meetings and we have done other kinds of documents and letters, that we need a letter for mayors in nuclear missile manufacturing towns, because we have to build trust that they won't be just left with no industry. Does that make sense?
Well, that's why we have this concept of economic conversion, which
but we
has
need a letter. My point was a letter that we
yes, yes,
have a template for.
Yeah, letters.
I propose that.
Thank you. Gloria has written us many sample letters, and some of the resources we're going to be pointing you to have sample letters that you can use to write to various people. You want to write to your politicians, you want to write to the owners of these companies, you want to write to your local newspapers. These are some of the things that we do here in the US. And now I see Shireen from Lebanon is wanting to speak. Shireen, yes, please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. That was congratulations first for the excellent work, for the excellent research. I learned a lot. Thank you so much. And I would like us also like to continue this discussion and to exchange also information. This is first. Second, as most of you, I think, know that in Lebanon, we faced, it's called the third biggest non-nuclear bomb that we faced in Lebanon during the port explosion. We faced this war, and not only this, like now 2-3 weeks ago, Israel bombarded various villages in Lebanon using like 600 tons of TNT, creating an earthquake of an equivalent of more than 2 degrees. So just to say, like, it's nuclear, and still like the implications of the present day wars and tested bombs, maybe a kind of research that we want to amplify, because maybe the usage of nuclear weapon comes as a last resort for these decision-making spaces. But it's the thing that they keep on threatening us with. But what about these weapons that are being used on a daily basis? bombs that are prohibited by international law, like the phosphorus weapons and other weapons that are being used, and the weapons that are being tested on us, including the AI related one. So this is one. Second, given the fact that we have also this issue of the third largest bomb that we had in Lebanon, we have a partner from Italy that will donate to Lebanon, to us in WILPF Lebanon, a tree that will be a symbolism of the Hiroshima bomb. And I want to say that I visited that place where these students were, and I visited the museum and I visited the memorial place because I used to study in Japan for my PhD. And during that visit, one of the things that struck me most, because it was very sad to look into that museum and to visit the museum. But at the end of the museum, there is a tree coming up, and it shows you that despite of all the destruction, life will continue. And that was a message of hope. And I think that the work we do together is the sign of hope, despite all of the destruction. I mean, like even at times we lose hope, not only me. I have here also a colleague from Yemen and maybe others from conflict area. I'm not sure. But at times we lose hope, but then we regain hope when we see this collective effort and how we, like, our voices together can make the difference. Third point, I want to say that definitely we want a free zone area in our region. I mean, despite all of these weapons that are being tested on us, and the nuclear weapon that Israel has and still does not admit, what if now, within the present war that we are facing, and by the way, the war is renewed, and there is no ceasefire. You read in the newspaper that there is ceasefire. There is no ceasefire. People are killed on a daily basis. What if this nuclear weapon is being used in our neighbor? It's just like a few meters away from where I live, like 100 kilometers or so. So this is the kind of danger that we live. Fourth point I want to raise is that I was not aware until very recent that there was a nuclear bomb that was tested in Algeria. We do not mention this. So let's also talk about these people who are not part of our discussion. Let's also hope that this Habakusha, I met them also 2 years ago in the peace boat. I went on the peace boat on a peace trip, and I know
Okay.
the suffering that they have.
All right,
Thank you, Sharon.
Shireen, we have some other people who want to speak. And our intention was to give you a brief overview of the whole nuclear weapons enterprise. And yes, I have written reports on the fact that Algeria, the Marshall Islands, Kazakhstan, and Australia all had nuclear bombs exploded over them to test them, okay, back in the 1950s and 60s. The next person I see is Dee. Please try to keep your remarks just short so that we can call on more people and still finish at 1:30. Thank you, Dee. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this very enlightening and informative presentation. I was especially stricken by the youth that are understanding that this is their future, that they're going to inherit this. And I remember when first learning at a very young age about nuclear weapons, not being able to sleep at night because there was just, I mean, this looming threat that's omnipresent. It feels kind of almost like we're fighting uphill against it feels almost futile at times because it's the same way in which the battle against guns goes. For everyone you get off the streets, there's another person that's hiding one. And I don't know how, we can try to, I mean, I love the suggestions that you have about protesting and writing your senators, but if we were to get rid of them all here, another country's got them, and then they can threaten us with it, and round it goes. The best solution that some of us have thought of is to do exactly what's being done. The youth have to, get into government. They have to be the ones to undo all the mess that's being created. Secondarily, I had seen an article in a newspaper about how artificial intelligence is now being incorporated into the use of nuclear weapons in a design. And I did a brief internet search to see, if I could find that specific article. I could not, but I did get a summary that's terrifying. I just entered it into chat. Just a condensed version of how the different ways that AI is now being incorporated into this. And that's going to create a whole new mess because at any given point, AI can make decisions on our behalf. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dee. Yes, AI is, again, treaties could be written and negotiated about, and some countries have already suggested that. The US, unfortunately, is blocking some of these good ideas. And so we keeping on pressing on our politicians and our diplomats is and showing them that it's not just a few of us, but there are millions of Americans, and there have been polls, public opinion polls showing that, it's like 70% of Americans don't like nuclear weapons and want them abolished. When we have to make sure that these public opinion polls come to the attention of our politicians. Yes, Eileen, you're next. Unmute yourself.
Shireen, I just wanted to respond to one of your questions about the Israelis possibly using nuclear weapons. They have at least 60, probably 90. We don't know for sure. I think they'd be damn fools if they did, because the downwind, the contaminated soil would be detrimental to all their plans. They'll be dead. The other thing is about AI. I've been working on that for years now, and I find that AI is something that we really do have to push for regulations. The Europeans are doing, and other countries are doing better than we are. And there are growing numbers of people in Congress who are getting tech smart. This is a better opportunity now, but it's an uphill battle without a doubt because of the Golden Dome. They're doing a lot of foolish things that are existentially challenging and scary. That's all.
Thank you, Eileen. So Alan Harbour, who is also in France right now, can you pose a question or give us an idea?
Well, just about the whole world is against these weapons. And I think we should identify that this is civil society of all of humanity that we are speaking for and trying to give expression to. And there is a treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. In our countries, we should, wherever our countries are, we should press them to inform this treaty. But more specifically, every one of us are in some community, and the Mayors for Peace is a local organization that has the local governments pressing for the abolition of nuclear weapons, and they have resources in their communities to see what are the creators of weapons, the whole economic system of the nuclear system from the local level. And so I encourage wherever you are, like in Ann Arbor, Michigan, or in there, wherever, to get the Mayors for Peace, get our mayor to be part of the Mayors for Peace, and to do all this work. Where is the economic system of the nuclear system in our localities, and begin this divestment process? But we are all part of a civil society worldwide, and that is the voice that is speaking to the nuclear powers that need to be, in some sense, shamed, and in some sense given the opportunity to make peace in the world, rather than to continue this opposition to one another in the most gruesome and horrendous way.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Just to come back to what Shireen was talking about, other weapons that are currently being used in many civil wars in the and wars between sovereign nations. So WILPF International has a disarmament working group, which was started by some members of Young WILPF. Unfortunately, they could not be here today. They had other appointments, and one person is not well. But they have monthly meetings, and nuclear weapons are not the only thing they are working on. So there are small arms treaties, and so those of you who would like to continue working on disarmament from various points of view, not just nuclear weapons, you should be writing to the Secretariat in Geneva and ask to be put on the disarmament working group. Okay, that is different from our committee here in the US. This is an international WILPF group that is mostly young people working on various types of armaments that need to be disarmed. Just to also to point out that you need multilateral treaties. We are not asking the US to get rid of all its nuclear weapons and let Russia and China keep theirs. That is not the way diplomacy works. You have to have a treaty where everybody's going to, get rid of their nuclear weapons. It was done in the late 1990s, the early 1990s, where, as Eileen explained, tens of thousands of nuclear weapons were destroyed. They were taken out of their stockpiles and they were destroyed. You can take apart a nuclear weapon, okay? It is
Wait
hard.
a second, you froze for 2 seconds.
Sorry. Okay. So I'm just saying everybody has to get rid of their nuclear weapons at the same time, okay? We're not, often people, when I'm talking to my friends about this or people I meet on the street at demonstrations, we shouldn't just get rid of our weapons. Yes, everybody has to the 9 countries have to get rid of them all at once. The 3, US, China, and Russia have the most. And so getting some new agreements between them is what WILPF, my group, is helping the Arms Control Association. There are a lot of anti-nuclear weapons organizations out there, and so please do not feel you're alone. There are literally thousands of people who are working against these awful weapons. We hope that we have managed to convince you that it's not just the exploding of the weapons that is a horrific possibility. It's the whole process of mining the uranium, transporting it, turning it into weapons, testing them, and all the radioactive waste that is produced by nuclear power stations. All of this is part of what we call the enterprise of nuclear weapons, and we need to deal with each of those steps and different people are working on different parts of that whole process. So we will be this session, which has been 90 minutes, has been recorded, and we will be putting it on the YouTube of WILPF US, and then our colleagues at International WILPF have their YouTube, so it'll also be put there, and we will be advertising it to make sure that it can be watched, because only 20 or so of you came, whereas 37 people did register, and so anybody who registered. So we are hoping that we've inspired some of you to to go out and do more of this. It's difficult work, but it has to be done. So Ellen, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I'd like to encourage people to save your chat. I have put a number of links in there, and I think that you will be able to find a lot of information there. So
Right, and we did.
Thank you so much, all of you who have put this together, and all of you who came, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Yes, thank you. Ellen is our co-chair of our Disarm Committee, and here in the US, I see some of you from other parts of the world. Maybe take a couple of minutes. Is there somebody else from outside the US who would like to tell us something about what is going on in their part of the world? And I'm sorry that we were not able to do the voice translation. So I do hope that those of you from Francophone countries were able to understand what we were saying. Yes, Eileen?
Just check the chat. I put in information about the SPEED Act. We're having a presentation with an expert at 8 o'clock tonight.
Eastern time.
That's 8 o'clock Eastern, and this is an act that we're trying to prevent from getting passed in the Senate. It passed in the House. It will allow businesses to bypass the regs that the Environmental Protection Agency has set up over the decades, and that to protect us from bad water, bad food contamination, things like that. It's an important discussion, and this particular woman, Elaine Simoneau, has been fighting the good fight in New Mexico, where Castilian Company is going to be building rocket engines and contaminating arid soils with very much little water. It's a pretty disgusting, but it's not only there, it's everywhere, and it's going to get worse if this act passes.
Okay, Odile, you have your hand up.
Usually I see save the chat, but I don't see save the chat anywhere. So
Don't worry, some of us have saved it, Odile. We'll make sure it's sent out, okay?
thank you.
And so anybody who registered, we still have the work to do to put together the information where we gathered it. The WILPF Disarm Committee has a whole webpage full of resources about getting rid of nuclear weapons and dealing with autonomous weapons and things like that.
You froze again.
Oh dear. All right. Sorry.
Maybe
Okay.
it's time to go. Thanks, everybody.
Yes. So thank you, everybody, for coming.
That was Eileen who froze, not.
Okay, not me. All right.
Oh, no, I saw Cheryl freeze.
Yeah, it's on your
All
computer.
freezing up, and I don't know why. It's only 94 degrees here.
Okay, climate change is another of those existential threats that we know you're worrying about. We just ask you to add to that the threat of the use of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but we wonder whether it's safe to have nuclear stockpile with that type of heat that we have now. So this is very worrisome.
Worrisome, yes. Lots of new.
As are all weapons. I agree with Shireen. We're doing our best to get the worst one out of our hair. Ha ha ha.
Yeah. Okay. Peace to you all and hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you, Ellen Thomas, for running our show here, and she will be the one making the video, posting it, so you can then show, point to your friends and say, please go watch this 90-minute session. You will learn a lot about nuclear weapons and what you can do.
I'll send you the YouTube link as soon as it's up.
Yes,
I have your emails, all of you. So.
Yeah, all of you will get the link to the recording as soon as Ellen Thomas has finished it. So,
I'm going to end the recording now.
Yes, you can end
have
the
a good
recording.
Congress.